Welcome to Unpacked. Today's episode is a German choose-your-own adventure. Wir werden denen zeigen, wie Deutsche Heulen. Actually, that was straight from Google Translate, and for the Germans out there, I'm very sorry for butchering your language. I'm sure in the comments you're gonna tear me apart, but it's okay, because I went to Germany recently, which is a really nice place. It is great, and all the people are wonderful, and shoot, I forgot my lederhosen for this episode. So NCIX is starting to branch out into the European marketplace. Well, okay, actually, I mean, for those of you in North America, they're starting to branch out into European brands for you guys. And you ain't seen nothing yet, because there's brands in Europe that you probably never even heard of. I mean, well, you probably heard of BeQuiet. Get its joke? Heard of BeQuiet? Quietly. But probably not these other two. So in Canada, these three German cases are NCIX exclusives for the time being, so we thought we'd briefly show off each of them. Let's start with this one from Raijintek. They're a fairly newly established company. They just started up in 2013, but they've already got a whole lineup of air coolers, liquid coolers, and fans. The one we'll be talking about here, though, is the Aeneas. This is a cube micro ATX case designed with airflow in mind. So we'll take a brief tour then, shall we? On the outside, there's an LED light bar design that can be switched on or off if you choose. At the back, you'll find a 140mm fan pre-installed with an optional 120mm mount for, 5 PCI expansion slots, so you can do a dual slot card in the bottom slot if you want. Another 140mm fan. Remember, this case is all about airflow. That one's also pre-installed. And of course, your motherboard I/O and power supply slot. On the right-hand side panel, you find more air intakes, in this case filtered. On the left side panel, you find a nice tinted window. I'm actually becoming rather fond of the whole tinted window thing, especially when it's done tastefully with something like a, black coated interior. So even if you put some LED lighting and stuff in there, it's not gonna look like way over the top, like super blingo-tasticky gamery. It can still look pretty tasteful. On the top, you've got top I/O, so 2 USB 3 ports, 2 USB 2 ports, as well as your usual power reset and front panel audio ports. And then at the front, you've got two 5¼ bays, or you would have two 5¼ bays if one of them wasn't an external 3½ bay. So that's one 5¼ bay and one 3½ bay. You don't see those 3½ bays very often anymore, but there are still some things that do install in them. So it's got 4 pre-installed fans, 2 140s in the rear, and 2 120s that I didn't show you in the front. Moving along to the inside, the entire interior is black coated, did mention that before, and is made from 0.8mm commercial quality sheet steel. The motherboard tray is removable via tool-free screws if you are into that, and your name starts with R and your last name starts with R. And there are dust filters for all of the mesh areas, which is really important if you're gonna have a slightly negative overall internal air pressure, like you probably will if you use the default fan configuration, which is those 2 140mm fans I showed you in the back, and an additional 2 that are in the front. Now, you can accommodate radiators, which is pretty nice, so you can have up to a 240mm rad in the front and a 280mm rad up top if you remove the optical drive cage. And you've also got support for a 200mm fan in the front, but not a radiator. It supports 4 3.5-inch hard drives and 5 2.5-inch hard drives, and video cards up to about as long as they get these days, so 31 centimeters or just over 12 inches. For your cooler, that is often a concern on cube-style cases. You can go up to 180mm because the motherboard is mounted kind of at the mid-plate of the case overall. So that's often a worry, is that you won't have enough room for tall heat pipe tower coolers. All right, so let's move on to the Anidees, which is a kind of funny name because originally they were called Anidees, but that changed to Anidees. We could have made a joke about this one too with the name of the case, but we decided not to do that because it wouldn't have been tasteful. Anyway, grammar and stuff, and then kept the whatever. Anyway, Anidees. So their whole slogan is ideas from you, and they really want to work with users to create products with customer feedback. So cases that go like, as you get close to them. Feedback, get it? It's a joke? Okay, too many jokes here. So like legitimately on their site, on the product pages, they actually have a get in touch button if you want to give them feedback on the product, which I think is really, really cool. Onto the case, this is the AI6 Silent. This mid-tower case is shrouded in aluminum. We're going to use the European pronunciation of aluminum because it's a European episode. So, first up is the front. We've got a door to hide the bays, which opens up a little something like that. 3 5¼ bays, noise dampening material on the inside of the door, and then a filtered mesh intake across the entire rest of the front. That's going to get air from these vents that are in the front door on the sides here and here. On the top, we've got lots of front I/O. So 2 USB 3 ports, 4 USB 2 ports, microphone and headphone jacks, power reset buttons, and the usual LEDs, as well as another brushed aluminum panel. On the right-hand side, you get just a standard powder-coated steel panel, and then on the left, you get another standard powder-coated steel panel. On the bottom, you've got dust filters right there to go with the one in the front, and on the back, you've got a 120mm exhaust fan. You've got 8 PCI expansion slots, as well as an auxiliary one if you want to install like a fan controller there or something, and then a padded power supply mount. On the inside, let's go ahead and open this baby up on camera. Thumb screws. I like thumb screws, you know. On the inside, we find noise dampening material on the inside of the panels. This is important with any kind of, noise dampening case or something like that. Anyway, we've got 7 3.5-inch hard drive expansion bays, which you can also use for 2.5-inch drives. Fairly standard motherboard tray layout with a CPU cutout. You've also got a built-in fan hub for power distribution. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of the location right here because you can see it. I might have preferred to have it on the back of the motherboard tray, but there isn't a ton of room on the back of the motherboard tray, so I can understand why they might have done it that way. You've actually got another one here, so there's a ton of fan distribution hub abilities, and remove these to make more room for longer graphics or expansion cards, or even you can remove the bottom one to make room for a 240mm filtered radiator in the front. You can also install a 120 rad in the rear should you so desire. So that's, I guess, pretty much it for that little bad boy. The main feature here is those fan power distribution hubs. Very cool. Next up, we've got the Silent Base 800 from BeQuiet. They don't really need much of an introduction, but this is their first case, which has actually been many years in the making. We've got the black on black version, but there are also black versions with silver and orange. And as the name would suggest, of course, the case has silence in mind. There is a ton of noise dampening going on with this particular chassis. So starting on the outside, the air duct comes through channels on the side designed to not allow sound to escape. The top vents have angled channels similar to the way a car muffler works, so that sound is directed towards the back as opposed to the front and to keep it from reaching the user. Every single air intake has filters, so the idea is you should be able to keep dust out of the system while maintaining positive airflow if you wanted to do such a thing, which is definitely good. One of the big stories here for me is the fans that are included. So you get 2 140mm Pure Wings 2 fans in the front, one 120mm Pure Wings 2 fan in the rear, which are pretty darn nice fans to have included with a case. There's space for a dual 140mm radiator up top, and the optical drives are, of course, toolless, although this has been industry standard for quite some time. It comes with rubber mounts to allow for toolless and silent hard drive mounting, and it has that same sort of removable 3.5-inch drive bay type system that we've been seeing for a little while. Now, one pretty cool thing that, again, it's not really the first time we've seen it, but it is a nice touch, is right here on the side panels, we've got these removable pieces here that can have intake fans added to them. If you want to decide to go, okay, I don't want to be quite as silent, I want to take this piece off, and I want a little bit more cooling for my internal components. It's just got 7 PCI slots, so you'll only be using standard ATX motherboards in it and all that. But overall, for a first attempt, I think it looks pretty darn good. Now, I actually have the orange version back at our studio, and the rubber grommets here are actually color matched to the edition of the case that you go with, which I think is pretty darn cool. But yeah, very, very, very solid initial build. And as long as you like the looks of it, then I think it's definitely a good choice. Now, I haven't actually shown you guys the outside yet. I realized I kind of got ahead of myself here, but there's 4 5.25-inch bays in the front. And then a gigantic, enormous power switch, 2 USB 3 ports, 2 USB 2 ports, and front panel audio. So I guess that's pretty much it for this episode of Unpacking German Cases. Thank you for watching. We are going to be building a water-cooled rig into one of these, and we'd love for you guys to vote in the comments and let us know which case you want to see liquid-cooled. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Ah, shoot, I forgot my lederhosen for this episode. Lederhosen. I'm actually